Hi, I'm Erik Hall, the digital sports editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and I'm joined by Lisa Wilson of The Athletic, who was APSE president in 2020, 2021. Thanks for joining me, Lisa.
Thanks, Erik.
So how did you get involved with APSE?
So when I became sports editor at the Buffalo News in 2011, Michael Anastasi called me and reached out to me. APSE was in Boston that year. And prior to that, I knew a little bit about APSE. I knew it was a place where my boss would go and sometimes come back with a couple of plaques, but that was really about it. I didn't know too much about the organization, honestly, before I moved into that role of sports editor. So Michael called me and asked me would I be willing to come to Boston to the conference. And I told him sure. And honestly, I expected to go there, probably be bored, say hi to a few people, and go because I was invited. So I wanted to take him up on the invitation. And, here I am 12 years later, still very active in the group and haven't been president. So it was certainly worth coming to Boston. I'm so glad he called me to come and join the organization.
Yeah. What are some memories of that Boston convention?
How great it was to be in a room with people who were very welcoming and had such great advice for you, even if you didn't go up to them and ask. And it's something that I've tried to do, as I've gone through the years of APSE, when I meet new editors, kind of talk to them and find out what they're doing and give them as much career advice as I can, because I didn't ask for it. But, people were kind of just telling me, oh, you're a new sports editor, telling me some things that they had learned in their career, some advice for me. And of course, it's where I met one of my greatest mentors in Garry D. So those are the memories of that Boston conference.
That's great. How did you ascend to then become president of the organization?
Funny you should ask. I might be the only past president you're talking to who you actually nominated to be president. I remember that was 2017. It was one of the few judgings I didn't attend because it was the year I left the Buffalo News to go to the Undefeated. So I was moving from Buffalo to the DC area, so I just couldn't make it down that year. And I remember you and Larry Graham called me and said that, nominations were up for second vice president. Would I consider running? And I said yes. And honestly, it's something, I was active in the group. It kind of crossed my mind. Maybe one day I want to run for leadership. But it's interesting when people see things in you that maybe you don't see in yourself, that gets you thinking, okay, maybe I can do this. If you hadn't called and nominated me, who knows if I would have been thinking about it. But if you and Larry, who had been really active in this organization, saw something in me and thought that I could lead the group, I was more than willing to take a chance and run and see what would happen. And then by winning second VP, it kind of confirmed that others in the organization saw me as a leader as well. And that's everything. When people see things in you, it kind of gives you the confidence to know that you can do the job and kind of push forward.
Yeah, I was definitely excited when you said yes, because I wasn't sure whether you'd say yes. And then when you got elected, that was exciting to see.
It was, yeah. Because, some people turn down the nominations for time constraints or whatever, but, I thought it was something I'd have the time to do, and you kind of gave me that push to actually do and run for leadership. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad. What are you most proud of from your time serving as president?
Well, my nickname was the pandemic president. Right when I was ascending to the presidency was COVID and shutdown, and the summer conference was canceled. I'm the only president, and hopefully will always be the only president, to give my opening speech on Zoom. So it was a strange year. But what I wanted to accomplish that year was to kind of get the organization through that as best we could and come out on the other side. So obviously we couldn't meet. We couldn't have any region meetings in person. I had to cancel the winter conference. But I tried to do as much virtually as I could. So we had a virtual winter conference. Somehow we navigated all remote judging for the first time, and Gary Petoskey and the other officers were really huge in getting us through that. So really proud that we were able to get the contest done, because we'd never done it fully remotely. So we learned that, okay, we could get the contest done. Obviously, it took a lot longer than we thought. We kind of called it the never-ending contest, but it got done. And I'm really proud that we were able to do that. We weren't able to meet personally in the regions, but we had some region check-ins. I just wanted to kind of make sure that the organization stayed relevant during that time, because that was a strange time. Everyone was just trying to get through it and kind of get used to the new way of doing things. Sports is shut down. So, tried to make sure we stayed together as a group as much as we could, that we were there for each other for advice of how we were getting through, trying to navigate, sports for that period, access the way it was, at the time. So very proud of that I was able to get the organization through that strange COVID year and finish with an in-person conference, which I did not think was going to happen. But being able to push that back, and Glen Crevier deserves so much credit for being able to get that conference moved from June to August. This is right when vaccines were coming out, and we said, okay, if we can get enough people vaccinated, we might be able to have this in person. So being able to do that and give my closing speech in person was very important to me, and I was very proud that I was able to just kind of get us through that year and kind of set us up for returning to normal and growing the organization even more. Two other things I'd say I'm really proud of was getting the lab check report done, our gender and racial report card. We had gone usually 2 years apart, but 2018 was the last time we did it, and because of the pandemic, like everything kind of slowed down and shut down, we were kind of behind schedule. So it really should have come out in 2020. I was leaving office in 2021. I wanted to make sure it was done to kind of get us back on schedule. So I was able to do that. It took a lot of emailing and staying in touch with our members to kind of make sure, hey, do the survey. It's always a tough thing. People don't want to fill that out sometimes because maybe their diversity isn't where they want it to be. But I try to convince people that it's okay if it isn't where it wants to be, because we're being judged as a group, and it's very important that we see how we're doing and that we try to do better. And if you don't fill out the survey, we're really not going to know where we are or if we've been better since the last time we did that. So I was really proud to get that done, and also extremely proud that Garry D, who I just talked about as my mentor, that we were able to get another scholarship for APSE that honored Garry and benefited an HBCU student. And that was key with Phil Kaplan. When I called Phil to kind of talk about the fact that I wanted to name a scholarship after Garry, Phil had been thinking the same thing, which was really interesting. So we were able to, plan that and get Garry on a Zoom. We had to trick Garry. I told him I didn't want him to talk to some of our student chapters. And so he got on, and it was just the two of us at first. And then Phil comes on, and I was wondering if he was going to figure out exactly what we were doing. He didn't. He's like, hey, Phil. And then we told him what we were doing, and it brought him to tears, which was really great, to see. So those are a few of the things that I'm proud of during my presidency.
Yeah, that's quite an impressive list.
Thank you.
You talked about it a little bit. Can you elaborate more on what went on behind the scenes to get that 2021 convention to happen in Vegas?
Oh my gosh. It's Glen. Glen was so key for a lot of these things. We had to cancel Indy in 2020 when I was taking over. And Glen had to work with the hotel to get that moved to 2022. That was last year. Yeah, so he had to work to get that moved. The winter conference, we had to cancel that. So we were able to get that moved. We had a 3-year commitment, so he was able to get that moved. So we were able to get that without penalty. And then we were wondering, could we possibly swing a third conference to either cancel or move without having it? Because, if you book a hotel and you don't go through with it, obviously there's a huge penalty. And, with state of the industry and, finances being what they were, there was no way we wanted to have to eat that and have to pay a huge penalty on that. So Glen being able to move that was huge. So it was a lot of really working with the hotel, and, if we were able to move the conference, it was going to require a return trip this year, and that's why we're going back to Vegas. Glen was so key in getting all that done. So I really have to give him so much credit. If I'm going to start naming how that happened, Glen would be at the top of that list. And then from there, it's the other officers were just kind of planning things and trying to figure out how we do things. And, it was tough, right? Should we be doing this? Because as the months were going on, every other organization and ABJ, awesome, they were canceling or doing virtual. So it's should we do this? Are we being irresponsible by doing this? We had to worry about that. But, as time went on and people were being vaxxed, we said, we can probably do this and do everything we can to try to keep it as safe as we can for our members. And I think we were able to do that. That was the year where we just, if you remember, we had just all general sessions. Yeah. We didn't have the repeat workshops that we do every year. So So we get into a room, spread out, do it once. That was one way we tried to do it. Hospitality would have been a bad idea that year, so we decided not to have hospitality that year. So just a lot of planning of trying to get this done and try to do it as safely as we can was a lot of what went into that.
Yeah. Speaking of conferences, like, are there any other memories or highlights from other conferences that stick out to you from your time attending at the APSE?
You know, I wouldn't say there's a particular conference, but what I enjoy most about these conferences is when I get to meet new people. And there's so many people I've met over the years through APSE, you know, relationships that have developed both personally and professionally. That really sticks out. What really sticks out for all APSE conferences is just kind of the camaraderie, you know, and the fellowship that you get here.
What has APSE meant to you professionally?
Oh my gosh, everything, everything. It's part of why I've moved on to other jobs. You know, when I became sports editor at the Undefeated, that's through contacts I made here. The Athletic, I actually talked to Paul Fichtenbaum in Nashville at an APSE conference and moved from the Undefeated to the Athletic where I am now. That's all through APSE. As a young editor, when I started to come every year, it meant a lot that people kind of got to know me, remembered some of the work I did, and just to have people come up to you. You know, you're always hoping you're doing a good job. Yeah. But feedback is so important, you know, like if you get that from your boss, if you get that from the people who work for you, if you get that from your peers, it means a lot. And it especially means a lot from your peers. So I would have Joe Sullivan for the Boston Globe, you know, great section. You know, I remember one time, I can't remember, maybe it was Chicago. The Chicago conference might have been the second conference that I came to. And the News won a couple of awards. And Mike James from the LA Times came up to me and said, "Oh, didn't you win 3 last year?" And that means, you know, for a young editor, like the LA Times sports editor remembered that you won some stuff last year and tells you great job. Wow. So not only did that help me kind of grow as a professional as far as the things you learn here in each session, you always take something away from all the sessions of the summer conference. Or if you come to judging, reading stories, as you know, you get so many ideas. You just kind of learn what good writing is as you're doing this. So not only did that help, it's just the confidence boost I think I got from APSE meant so much to me professionally. And that's because people took the time to get to know me and tell me, "Hey, you're doing a great job."
What are some of the personal relationships that have meant the most to you that you've made through APSE?
Oh my gosh. It's great. Like I said, before I came to APSE, you know, I had mentors, you know, throughout my career, but really having Garry was the mentor that really, he'd tell me I was doing a good job, but he would also tell me when I wasn't. Yeah. And that's what you need. You know, you need a mentor who's going to praise you, but also kick you in the butt. And that was Garry. Anybody who knows Garry will know what I'm talking about, you know, that he's the best mentor you can have. So yeah, that's professional, but it's also personal because he's a mentor, but he's also a very good friend, you know, and I've met so many friends through APSE, other women, as you know, there aren't as many of us in this industry as there should be. Other journalists of color, you know, there aren't as many as there should be. And, you know, I've helped develop those relationships through other groups as well, but also through APSE. It just means a lot. You know, people reach out to me when things have happened in my life. And that's, you know, it's meant a lot to me personally just because of the friendships I've made here. I think anyone who stays in APSE and attends conferences always leaves here with a new friend. And so that's been really great for me.
What advice would you have for future presidents of APSE?
If I was going to give advice for future APSE presidents, one thing I did before I became president is I called past presidents and kind of asked for advice because you really don't know. You can kind of have an idea. I mean, you've seen presidents leading the meetings and doing some of the things. You kind of know some of what's involved, but there's a lot that you don't know that's involved. So I called past presidents to say, what advice would you give me taking over? And I learned a lot of different things that have kind of got me ready to do the job. That's one thing. I'd say reach out to as many past presidents as you can just to kind of find out what they did. You know, not only did I find out what they did well, some folks were telling me things they would have done different if they'd known. So that was kind of good to be armed with that information going into it. I'd also recommend that presidents set a few attainable goals that you can do. When you're APSE president, you want to do everything and change everything, and that year goes by like that. It really does. So try to set a few goals that you want to accomplish. Try to figure out what kind of legacy you want to lead and work towards that. You can't change everything in an organization that's been around this long in a year, but you can do enough to make your mark on it. That's one thing I'd recommend. I'd also hope that presidents coming will stay involved in the organization, because there's some things I wanted to accomplish that I probably didn't get to, but I said, wait a minute, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay in APSE. I'm going to be involved in APSE. I'm going to come to judging. I'm going to work on committees. And I ended up taking over the career development committee. So a lot of what I was started when I was president, trying to connect more with the student chapters and do all that. We got a really good start on that. We started doing the Zooms with the students and kind of get them more. A lot of them have been active among themselves, but I don't think they came together much or was involved with the national as much as they could have been. And that's one of the things I tried to accomplish during my presidency. But there's a lot more we can do with student chapters. And I can't get that all done in a year. But if I stick around and stay on these committees and work with the students, eventually I think we can get to where we want to be. Yeah. So just because I'm not president anymore doesn't mean that I can't work towards some of the things that I wanted to do when I was president and continue that and do that to make the organization better. And some past presidents are still around. You see, I'm not the only one. You see John Bednarowski, you see Tommy Dees, what he does with sponsorship. Phil Kaplan, what he does with the scholarships. And that's just to name a couple. And then there's some past presidents, unfortunately, you just don't see anymore. And that's for whatever reason. They switch jobs or whatever, But if you can stay involved with the organization, I think it's so worth it past your presidency. And that's why I'm still here. I'm going to continue to be here. Another thing I'd recommend is to start thinking about your presidency well before you're taking over. Because one of the things I tried to do as first VP was kind of talk to people in the organization and say, how's everything going for you with APSE? What might you want to see? What would you change? What do you like? What's some of the things you change? Those conversations are so important to kind of start working on that well before you actually take over. And I didn't do that as when I was second VP because we kind of have these roles that we take on. The second vice president runs a website. The first vice president is really consumed with the contest and it's a time suck, and then you take over as president and you get moving, and like I said, that year's over. But start thinking and working towards some of your presidential goals, because you have 3-year term as officer. Start working on some of that when you're second VP, and you won't feel that you have to get so much accomplished in a year if you kind of start early. So that's just a few things that I kind of took away from my presidency that I'd share with any presidents coming behind me.
Yeah. What are you doing now in your career a couple years after your presidency?
As far as what I'm doing for APSE?
Oh, no, with the Athletic and in your career.
Oh, so yeah, when I came to the Athletic in 2018, I was the NFL managing editor, and now I'm an editorial director, and my groups include the NFL, so I'm so glad to still be involved with the NFL. Our culture vertical, our college basketball group, our new opinion vertical, and the universal desk are all part of my groups.
Is there anything else you want to add about your experience with APSE or any other fond memories?
I mean, there's so many. But again, this business is so much about relationships professionally, but also personally. And just, I wouldn't trade the relationships that APSE brought about for me for anything. It's just meant so much to me for my career and personally. And I'm not just saying this because you're giving me the interview, you're a really good friend, and you are a huge reason why I became president, because you said, hey, I think she'd be a good choice to be a leader. And that was everything, so that's, if you see something in someone, let them know, because that could be, the boost they need to go ahead and do what you think they can do.
Well, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad we're able to do this in person.
Yeah, for sure.
I probably wasn't looking at the camera.
No.